you gonna get free this time? Falling into a blue sky mind. Came to me and
Welcome back to You, Me, and the Elephant, where we put the elephant in center stage and we let the less explicit things in life become more explicit. This is Deb Air.
And crystal clear.
All right. And thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
And the crowd goes wild.
Does anybody ever do that? You're like ready to have your big moment in a conversation, and then all eyes are on you, and you're like, hey.
Bathroom break, please.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Oh my gosh, that's what Kasia Uberniak calls the freeze. There's this great book called Unbound by Kasia Uberniak. Anyway, sometimes we get the freeze on here. So, what is our question today? What do we have for folks today?
We have, how do you live a life in integrity? Why live a life in integrity?
Okay. Basically, integrity, I think about when we talk about I want to live in integrity, that we want to live in a sense of truth, that we want to do what's right, that we want to be congruent in some way with whatever our beliefs are and whoever we're being. And I think there's that righteous moral piece in there. That's what I have when I think about
And
it.
and I grabbed my little pocket dictionary here, and I love, because we were talking about this yesterday, but it says the state of being whole and undivided. And that undivided is underlined, and I feel like it's underlining in my brain right now. I'm like, yes, undivided. There's something about it that makes you feel complete and in alignment and flowful energy. And it's like all is well, all is one. You're in integrity.
Mm. I like that. I haven't read that definition, but I love it. How this started for me was that I heard someone talk about having an integrated life is living in integrity, and that integrity and feeling integrated, which is kind of what you're saying, is everything is right with the world, that there's an alignment, that there's a congruence that you feel, and that's part of that integration. And that I also was looking up the core or the origin, I guess. The root is the word I'm looking for. The root of integrity, which comes from integral, which is wholeness, which is completeness. And it's interesting because we didn't talk about this. So I love that you brought this definition up, because I often have heard people say, I just want to live with integrity. I need to say this thing because I value integrity. And so I have experienced also in my own life, and I'm saying the same thing. I guess what I'm saying, for me, sometimes it can have a charge to it. In my exploration of self and even understanding what feels true for me, a lot of us don't have, what kind of history do we have and of learning what we desire and what feels true for us in any given moment, or what's in integrity. So I think we learn about right and wrong, but I love starting this conversation with bringing it back to the core, the root of the wholeness. And how do we live in this state, or even checking in with what can feel whole for us in any given moment?
I almost went off a little bit because a part of the definition, there was two definitions, and one of them was like this moral righteousness,
Yeah.
like to be morally right. And I didn't connect to that one, so I didn't even say it, but you're so right, because that is when you're going to meet people that are going to go, I just want to be integritous. And in their mind, they're going, that means right and wrong. And what society is probably telling me is right and wrong, or my religion or my gods or whatever it is that is like I'm following, or maybe got handed down to me, whatever paper trail that was, or practice that they witnessed in their environment that is
Yeah.
already set for them, as if in order to be integritous, you have to follow these rules and there's going to be a right and a wrong and it came from somewhere, and that is a big piece that is up for people.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that was part of the spark for me because of listening to people over the years in their own healing and having them when they would come to that point and there's the integrity conversation, it had what you just said. There's a charge to it. It's like almost this sometimes this internal I need to do what is right, but what are we what are we basing that on? Like who's telling us it's right and
That's
wrong,
right.
basically.
That's right.
So so thank you. And it is that how do we live in this whole way where our internal life and our external life is in alignment?
Yes.
And so I think a way in which we've been really loving starting our conversations with some kind of together moment. And so I'm going to read one of my favorite poems that I think really kind of brings to light in the feeling. So I just really invite everybody to feel these words versus trying to understand them with your
Hmm.
mind, because I think that in the depth of this poem, is the heart of integrity. And it's called The Invitation by Oria Mountain Dreamer. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals, or have become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine and your own, if you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, be realistic, remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself. If you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul. If you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty even when it's not pretty every day. And if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, which happens to be today, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. And I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments.
Sidebar share. This is how high the bar was set for my application process when I came to work for Wellspring 6 years ago. Deb read this poem, and I not only did I arrive to Wellspring thinking, where am I? And what's going on in here? But then I sit in circle as a part of the application process, and she reads that poem, and I could just hear like the angels sing, and I'm so glad that I'm here. Yes, please. So, yes,
I
I
love
love
it.
that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thank you for sharing that. I remember that.
Mm,
I think there's something God, I can just feel that. I could read that poem over and over, and every time it speaks the sound, the wholeness of integrity in my soul.
it does.
And also it speaks to the relatability and challenges that come up, and how hard it can be to feel like we're living in integrity, or even what
Mm,
that is for us, right? Beyond what you were saying earlier, the right and the wrong. And I think one of the first things to go back to the right or wrong is, who are we abiding to? What are those gods in life that we may even unconsciously be abiding to? What is the God of what our family has taught us? What you mentioned this the other day, social media.
mhm,
Who are we listening to as the gods of truth?
totally.
When you pair that with the world we live in, we talk about this in our embodiment episode, that we are less encultured to, and we're just less connected in what our bodies want or need, that it's very easy to begin to look outside ourselves, right? Because if we're trusting ourselves less, we have to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a tough thing when we're trying, that there's this inherent organic nature to us. Like what you just shared, that when you came into a circle and something that in this poem was this container,
Mhm.
and perhaps the feeling and the heart and truth that I felt in reading it, that woke up the truth in you, that gave you permission to go, wow, this feels like true, this feels right, which kind of goes back to that right or wrong, but that
Yeah.
came from you, that came from an internal experience that is sometimes a hard thing to, I don't know, like track or even know how to recognize, because when
Mhm.
we're so conditioned to look outside of ourselves, how do we practice really listening inside, or even knowing what feels true in a moment? And it's those moments like that that are indescribable. It's kind of like the poem says, you don't have had to have a zillion teachers, you don't have to
Mhm.
have all this experience. You just know every cell is like, yes.
What I wanted to share too is that this was a job interview, folks. I was going into the compartment that says, "Dress nicely, mind your manners, have your resume printed, and be sure to make eye contact and do all these things that I thought I was supposed to do to get a job and meet new people and have this career part of my life." And there was something so refreshing. It was mind blowing. Not only did they capture me with just the description of the type of person they were calling in, but to actually be in the space and to sit down during the interview process and be invited to
Mm.
recognize this integritous piece of yourself by showing the integrity of what not only Wellspring, but Dr. Deb was presenting. She was basically inviting me of, if this is a match for you, I'm here and I can meet you halfway, and this is who I am and this is what we represent here. And the invitation is, if that's true for you, then you meet in the middle. And it was just, I mean, I remember I still had tears in my eyes hearing it this time, but I'll just never forget that poem. I still have it printed today from that interview that long ago. And I was like, what is happening? Like, that's like meant for church, or maybe that's meant for, oh, your spiritual journaling at home. It was, this is who you are. How you show up here
Mm.
is how you're going to show up everywhere. So it was mind blowing. So thank you for
Ooh,
being
yeah.
integritous.
Thank you. Well, you just really enlightened something for me that just dropped in as you were speaking, and it's making me teary-eyed. It's like, what if integrity is just inviting us, and it's bringing us back into our like wholeness as as a oneness, right?
Mm,
So that's that internal external, that there's an internal environment, there's an external environment, but there's a wholeness. And when you were just speaking about that, it's like there are a lot of levels. Number one, like you experienced something that didn't seem to fit into the role that the culture has of what a job interview would
yeah.
look like, right? So what was able to happen in that moment, which I think has to happen when we're living in integrity, is that there has to be enough of a cultural lift where all the gods that we abide to, that we think, like, okay, this is how I have to dress, this is how I
Hmm.
have to be to go to a job interview, that when for a moment, when that lifted, that there was this invitation to come back into wholeness, because my wholeness sees your wholeness. You know what I mean? And that
Yes.
that is ultimately at the core of living in integrity.
Yes.
It was really
Yes.
beautiful. I never really saw it that way. I mean, I had, again, like chills in my cells, and that's, to me, is that part where you're speaking and the vibration of who you are is reminding me that I am part of who you are, which I think gives, for me, I feel more confidence. I don't know if it's the right word, but I feel more integritous. I feel more confident to be able to, maybe, let's say, be more truthful with myself, because I think
Yeah.
it's great to say, hey, we could come on here and say integrity means you got to find out where you're not being honest with yourself. Like, are you lying to yourself? It could have a lot of shit like judgment and shame in it. And
Hmm.
then, like, no tools to be like, well, I don't even know myself enough to even know what does it feel like, mean like, if I'm quote unquote not honest with myself, versus the this whole other way of just saying, you sharing that is my point, is that I feel more available to know that I am living in a space in connection with you and you listeners, that it is okay to speak truth. It's okay to show your truth and even your confusion. Because,
Yeah.
like, if we're not sure, see, right and wrong has a black and white to it, right? Sometimes our truth is that I'm not sure, is a
Yes.
truth. Whatever it is we're experiencing is not always going to fit in a black and a white. So, where can that live? And if we can't invite ourselves to live in the spaces between
Hmm.
and live in the gray or different colors of life, we may never be able to find enough of ourselves to know how to move more into integrity. So we're always feeling this underlying incongruence or something that doesn't feel right.
Yeah. And it was mentioned even in the poem. I wish I was looking at it printed so I could say it exactly. But there was this piece of like, you're going to find yourself in, let's say, the right and the wrong. You're going to find yourself in the polarity sometime. You're going to find yourself doing the thing and you look back going, oh, like I'm going to do that differently next time. Like you're not always going to be in this place of righteousness or maybe even integrity. Like you're saying, you're in the gray, you're going in and out. It's this weaving and this blending that happens. But what do you do when that happens? Do you
Mhm.
separate yourself and now become a judger or a freezer or whatever it is? Or can you stand on the edge, which in the poem it was saying was, can you stand on the edge, basically bravely, and just know that there's more. There's more to it.
Yeah.
And can you be with that? Can you be with
Yeah.
you in
Yeah.
all versions of you? And that and it the even just saying the word integrity, there's something about it that is like, I get this feeling that's like, I don't even know how it can go wrong. I'm like this, it's such a all-inclusive love word somehow. It's like this thing of like, oh, like I know that's my truth, even if I don't know any definition to it. There's just something about it that's almost like a beacon calling you home. And it's so beautiful because it's like, you come home no matter how you are and who you are, just come home into the wholeness that is you, into the completeness that is you. Is so beautiful that the invitation and the poem's called Invitation. Like it's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting that as I'm feeling into integrity right now, that there's an experience of integrity. that is both intangible and tangible. There
Mhm.
lies the paradox again. There was my experience in saying, "Oh my gosh, like you said that and I have chills in my cells." So there's an integrity that happens that is very embodied, and it's also very transcendental. And then there is like from that place there is an action we will take from that place of wholeness, then we take action. When I hear other people talk about integrity and when I've talked about it myself, it's been more of that second part, like I need to act in integrity.
Mhm.
And we don't start with this feeling that you were just speaking to. How do we actually be with the spirit of ourselves, the spirit of integrity, which then is the thing that informs the action? That integrity is not just the action part, it's the willingness. And I do want to say that we talk about wholeness a lot on here, we talk about coming home. And I really want to acknowledge this part that this isn't an absolute, meaning our lives are truly like this dance in which there's days where we feel like we don't know where we belong. We have days where we feel like we're on top of the world. We have days where you're asked, "What do you want?" You may go completely blank. So when we get excited on here and we talk about these experiences, we're not saying that in order to live in integrity, you have to know what you want, what your truth is, that you're whole, that you feel connected with everybody. In fact, I've had a lot of people, and I want to acknowledge you because some of you are listening, that you start to feel more whole, you start to find more truths percolate up, and then you feel this incongruence, an out of integrity experience of what you're feeling and what your life looks like. So whether you feel like you don't have, this has come up a lot in the last month, that people don't have anywhere to go, meaning that their current landscape of their family and or the current landscape of their friendships and community do not match who they're growing into. So they feel alone and they feel lost. And I'll be honest, part of this podcast is to be a place where you can come, and certainly that's not to bypass needing live people in your life that are in alignment and integrity with who you're becoming. But I just feel like that's an important thing to acknowledge, that it's not an absolute. It's not like there's an ABC into wholeness. And once you get there, you've done it, you've
That's
checked the
right.
box. That integrity, living in integrity, this is to open up a discussion, a consideration that says, wait, what does that even mean to me? And how can I maybe expand what that means to me? Because I believe that most of us have some aspect of shame because it's very easy to not share. I mean, who here has not spoken up sometimes what they truly feel because they're either A, avoiding, they don't want to hurt that person, right? They're too nice, they're trying to be kind, or they freeze and they don't even know what they want, but they feel miserable, or you feel like you're stuck because, like no matter where you say, no one, no matter what you say or who you say it to, no one's listening.
Mhm.
Like, raise your
Yeah.
hand because that's part of being fucking human.
Yep.
And so I hope that when you listen to these conversations, that even if there's just one spark to go, this isn't about like, how do you live in integrity? God damn it. Be true, as much as we're actually almost doing the opposite. And that's what I'm feeling, and why I have such an inspired voice right now, is that this is a way of being able to say, gosh, what does it mean to me? And if I wasn't having this conversation with you, Crystal, then I don't think I would have even felt for myself like the part of the soul of integrity, and how that is something that I can invite into my life to check in with myself of like, what matters to me right now and the version of human that I am, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, so I'm really inspired by that. And there are kind of like three ways in that Crystal and I have talked about sharing some ways that we can practice and consider. If you feel at all like there's these incongruencies in your life right now and you know it, but you feel frozen or you feel stuck or you feel like no one gets you, we just want you to remember that this is just ways to check in. And if you don't feel like you make the mark, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, because this life is precious even when it doesn't feel precious. We're going to
That's right.
hold the memory for you that it is and that you absolutely matter. So, the first thing that we talked about is really doing a self inventory, getting your hands on your body, even finding a place in your body. And it could be over your heart. If your heart is feeling extra heartbreaky, maybe find a different place that feels a little bit more settled and calm and connected and potentially peaceful. And maybe start with a practice that just goes into this. And we're suggesting, like, do you want to do an integrity journal for a week? And the first part would be the check in with self. So it would start with a body exercise. If you already have one, if you have a meditation, we suggest getting your hands on your body. If you've listened to our voice episode, that we talk about different sounds, and are there ways basically where you can center yourself in your body with the intention that you're going to visit integrity today.
Mm.
And that would be the beginning of your entry journal, is hands on your body, find a place of peace, get the breath and the movement and the touch all happening in one place. And maybe if there's a place that feels yucky, you go there and you do the same exact thing, and maybe you bring a sound to it, and then you go back to that place that feels a little bit more in integrity, alignment, focus, connection. And so that place with yourself, you're just checking in. It's like taking inventory. Is there places that feel like you're having a hard time telling the truth? Maybe that's,
Mm.
I feel like that would be a good break in for me. You
Mhm.
can just simply ask, like, are there any places that you're not being honest with yourself? That doing the body exercise first is important. You can use any of the tools that we've shared so far on here,
Mhm.
and in just dropping into
Yeah.
your sensations and your feelings, and not moving away from the places in your body that may feel stuck or not so great, but always starting with the place that feels more connected. If you're feeling over
Yeah.
like a really tough day, then give yourself a hug and start breathing in your
That's right.
nose and out your mouth, and just do your best with that. I have a very dear friend, and she wasn't feeling well, and she has got a lot going on in her life, and she takes care of a lot of things and a lot of people. And I don't think she even realized she said it when she's in bed, sick, right? Not feeling well, and saying, I'm really mad at myself for being sick right now.
Mm.
And this goes into a lot of the pressures, right? The performance based. We read an article that talked about high percentage. I forget what it was, like
It was like
90% of it, like the 10%.
of the
Eh,
10%,
yes.
82%
Thank you.
those said
Yes.
that they had cheated to get to their academic success because
Yes.
and we know the fear of that came from, I have to pass, I have to do this thing, but it was a really high number of people that are like,
Yes.
damn right
So
I
it was of
cheated.
the
Yeah,
Yes, and it was of the 10%, and I think this part is important, of the 10% of the top students.
that's right.
And I think that we may be all different in our personalities, but I think just by living in our culture, there's a part of all of us that feel like, I want to be good at something. I want to be the best. I want to be the best me at something. And so this is an example of academia, but certainly that applies to all these pieces. So in that part of this first journaling part of taking inventory of self, like in my friend's case, and I did ask her, like, what are you mad at? Why is she mad? Because she's sick. And this is not her answer because I haven't heard from her yet, but like, if you can peel back the layers, that's what the journaling is good for. Just say what comes out without having to judge it. And yes, you'll judge it because there's
Mhm.
always judges. We've talked about that, but just write it down, and then ask yourself again, what am I not being honest with? And then just start writing. Like, sometimes it'll be blank. That's okay. Sometimes you'll start writing and be like shocked at yourself of what you wrote. And The reason I asked my friend that is because she's not mad that she's sick. She's mad because in order to be worthy, she can't stop and she needs to take care of all the things. So the lie is that her body doesn't matter. That's like a lie, right? I feel very compassionate. I think
Yeah.
when I get really juiced up, it's because not only do I feel compassion for her, it wakes up that part in me of
Mm.
how many times have I unconsciously overwritten because of my gods, because of what I adhere to in culture, that I'm not even realizing, like, what am I filling myself up with? How much am
Mhm.
I watching social media? What am I filling myself up with? Who am I connecting with? And so I think to go back to the journaling, keep asking the question. And I think that in each of these categories, can you give yourself the question 3 times
Mm.
minimum? What am I not being honest with? And then start writing. And then when that settles down, ask it again and you can write it down. What am I not being honest with myself about? And then do that 3 times. And then I would say drop the pencil or pen and get your hands on your body, do the same thing. And then you're going to ask, what am I not being honest with others?
Mm. Oh,
And
I feel that one. My God. What's wrong?
well, we just
Oh,
went through with
Lord.
some of that, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is appropriate to bring up, but I mean, we've alluded to this on here before that like Crystal and I have gone through, and I'm immensely grateful for the container and the love. It's not just love. The having this very devoted container in which we allow ourselves to be who we are, and we allow within that all of the elephants come up, but there's this very sacred container that I feel with Crystal. And so therefore, because of that, all of the incongruencies, the out of alignment sees, the out of integrity feelings start to come up. So one of the things that we recently, and we've gone through this in our different rounds of this, but is all of a sudden coming clean. Like, oh my gosh, there's things I want to say that I haven't been saying. And I think that this is where this part of the journal
Yeah.
comes in. If giving yourself a place, a safe place to say whatever the fuck you want. You may never even go to this person and tell them the truth, but you need to have that truth sit somewhere.
That's right.
It has to sit somewhere. And to kind of follow through with you and I, Crystal, like I feel so much more connected to you yet again because we went through those hard parts. And so for those of you like me that have a hard time sometimes knowing what you want to say to somebody and being worried somehow of like hurting their feelings or not being loved if you're going to say it, or being, I think one of my big things is being misunderstood. Just know that when you can start to align yourself with people who honor and have sacred containers for the same values, that there's so much power and there's so much depth that you can find not only within yourself but with the other persons.
I want to
Yeah.
add to that. I'm glad that you said sacred container. That is such an important piece. And I just kept visualizing as you were saying journaling. That's consider your journal, that piece of paper, your sacred container,
Well
because
said. Yeah.
it's within that sacred container that you get to be all the versions of yourself, wear all the hats, get to do all the different things. And
Yeah.
to me, that's a powerful piece. It gives me goosebumps because I'm a runner, right? I'm like, where's the door? Where's the exit? Get me out of here. Pain, something's happening, like all that. And it until I have made friends with and have experienced more and more and more and more and more the sacred container, I go into those places now and I don't even want to leave. I'm like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Let me get my pillow. Right. Like it's this thing that I'm like, oh, this is going to be a juicy one. I don't know what's going to happen. It's probably going to take a while, but I don't want to run. And there's something so powerful in that. So we may, you might be a person that's going, oh, yeah, like I don't have time to journal, or what's journaling going to do or whatever. And I'm telling you right now from experience, it is so powerful. Give yourself that time. I guarantee you somebody's checking Facebook or TikTok or whatever more than 6 or 10 minutes a day. And journaling can take that less, more, whatever. I invite you to do it because it is
Yes. Thank you. That's a big part. Like if we have a hard time even knowing where we may not be honest with ourselves, even giving this space to even let that bubble up and emerge, and if we have a hard time knowing how to speak to others or being frightened or want to go for the door and run, if we're not going to practice that somewhere, how are we ever going to live in more wholeness and integrity? Like
Absolutely.
it's and so the journal, this is a very specific exercise that you're not that we're saying, hey, these are the three things. We haven't gotten to the third thing yet, but these are the three things that you're going to go in and you're going to ask the question. You're going to give yourself, like you said, the free for all. This is where all of you gets to show up. This is where all of you is welcome. That the journal is actually the sacred container that will hold every part of you.
Mm,
And that you're going to ask the question, and then you're going to ask the question a second time, and then a third time, and then that's enough. That's enough. Now if you're one day you're just like something opens up and breaks, and I would not be surprised if some of you start to do this and you start to have some conversations with people, and it's not a pressure to do that. It's just I would not be surprised. So again, the second one of those questions is, who am I not being honest with?
mm,
The third question is, what agreements am I abiding to?
mm,
Now, I was originally going to say, what are the agreements that I'm not abiding to? Right.
mhm,
But and you can certainly ask that question, which would be a fourth question. But I think the first part of this is like starting to, in the whole vein of inexplicit to explicit. I think there's a lot of agreements, and we've talked about this before, that we have that we're abiding to, and gods and roles that we're abiding to, cultural norms we're abiding to, that we don't even realize we're doing this. So I think
mm.
doing this and asking the question, what agreements am I abiding to? Who am I abiding to? Those are the agreements that you can just start writing and just trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure, what do you see yourself saying a lot? What are you watching a lot? What conversations are you repeating a lot? Because in the center of that is where you're going to find where your agreements are and what feels right and wrong to you. And again, in between those times, getting your hands on your body. And there doesn't have to be a conclusion to this. We're saying do it for a week. You can continue to do it as long as you want, of course, but this is a very specific practice to really just start to open the landscape for yourself. Create that sacred container to even explore what integrity means to you, and the parts of self and the parts of being, honest with others, and then the agreements that we get caught up in. And in the example we gave of the students, where are we lying to ourselves or creating bad choices because we're abiding to the wrong things, the things that are out of alignment? So I think all three components are important. I think that it's very easy in our culture to abide by things that are sneaky, that we don't even realize that we're abiding to those things even though we don't want to. And I think that simultaneously it's very easy to say, oh yeah, call me, let's go out, and that there's a lot of little agreements that we don't actually hold merit to. Or the parent, I did this, 5 more minutes and we have to go, 5 more minutes and we have to go, and it's an hour later. What's coming out of our mouths? What are those things that we're agreeing to? So I think that this is an incredible start to just explore within yourself, and may it give you courage, may it give you a revelation
Mm,
in yourself, and may it create some more ease. And the other thing that I want to say about this is that, which kind of goes back to hearing people say, gosh, I'm making changes, but I'm realizing like my life isn't, I don't have anywhere to go. Again, I've heard that a lot lately. Whether it's a man and they're looking for a conscious brotherhood, or they're just not feeling supported by their family, or they have friends but they don't have friends that are having the kinds of conversations that go a little bit deeper. Know that the more you do something like this, the more that you shift the energy within
Mm.
yourself and you give more space, and the more that that ripples out around you. And this is when the serendipities happen, where
Yep.
you are doing the thing that you are in alignment with. And then all of a sudden, people that hold those same alignments are right beside you. So trust gives some faith and timing that the more you do this, the more you will meet people that will hold some of the same values as you. Thank you. Thank you. As always, we are humbled. And as always, I learn something as we're speaking. So
Every time this topic,
yeah,
all topics, they're so active in our lives at the same time. So it's truly a blessing to be able to be here and to show up. And I know everyone out there who's listening to this is showing up not only in your own lives, but for here too. So we're truly in it together. I love it.
me too.
Yeah.
Until next time. And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.
through the body. It's in and through the body. All along, in and through the body. All along, it's in and through the body. All along, in and through the body. All along, it's in and through the body. All along, in and through the body. All along, it's in and through the body.